I watched from the other side of the operations bay as Ian Merrill, yeah, that Ian, stood up from his desk like a man leaving his own funeral. Ryan Callahan, the new CEO, couldn't even look him in the eye. Just slid a termination letter across the desk while scrolling through his phone like some teenager deciding what to order on DoorDash. "We're eliminating non-essential roles," Ryan mumbled, already motioning for security like Ian was something contagious. Ian didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He just looked at Ryan, then at the nervous HR intern fidgeting next to the printer. "Let's do this properly," he said. Calm. No anger, no fight. Like he'd already grieved this company in his head 100 times and was just waiting for reality to catch up. Then I noticed it, his hand hovering for a second over the photo on his desk. It was him and Alan Worth, the original founder, standing in front of the first Silver Tree warehouse. Steel frames, wet cement. He looked at that picture like it was a gravestone. Then he turned and walked out. No box, no goodbyes. Just gone. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button and like the video. Seriously, 97% of people watching never do. And it keeps this channel running so we can bring you more wild true stories like this one. Here's the thing. Most of corporate had forgotten who Ian really was. They saw him as some old logistics guy, quiet and out of touch. But Ian was the one holding this place together. While Ryan and his brain trust were busy adding ping pong tables and hiring brand awareness consultants from LinkedIn, Ian was fixing real problems. He rebuilt the entire supply chain after the warehouse fire in '09. He handled the vendor recall in 2014, when we got an entire shipment of mislabeled parts from Guangdong. And when the execs were off meditating at HR retreats or doing their latest Vision Quest nonsense, Ian was still here. Always here. But because he wore the same fleece vests and ate lunch at the same table every day, they stopped seeing him. He became part of the background, like the faded tiles in the break room ceiling, still there but ignored. I watched it happen. First, his name vanished from meeting invites. Then his suggestions got logged but never followed up. And one day, just like that, he was erased from the org chart. Replaced by a director of culture engagement and some intern who once asked me if UPS was a startup. So when they let him go, most people barely reacted. Someone by the copier mumbled, he was probably gonna retire anyway. Another joked about needing room in the budget for a new vegan donut wall. The office was full of noise and espresso and people who had no idea what they'd just done. But I knew. Ian didn't walk out like a guy who got defeated. He walked out like a man who had just turned a page. And what nobody knew, what I only learned later, was that Ian had been playing a whole different game. For 20 years he'd quietly cashed out bonuses, skipped raises, and funneled it all into one thing: ownership. Class F shares. Silent equity. Legacy agreements buried under layers of shell companies. Routed through a blind trust, tied to old founding bylaws that none of the buzzword bros had ever bothered to read. And now they'd fired him. Thought they were saving money. But what they'd really done was cut out the spine. Ian didn't drive off right away. He just sat there in his old Subaru, the same spot he'd parked for 15 years, staring straight ahead. Like the windshield was playing a highlight reel of every time Ryan had cut him off mid-sentence. The "let's keep this high level, Ian." The maybe logistics isn't where innovation happens. The "we need modern thinkers in the driver's seat." I still remember the day Ryan told the ops team to stop calling it the warehouse and start calling it the fulfillment arena. Ian didn't even blink. Just clicked his pen, jotted something down, and kept going. Ian sat there, still as stone in that old Subaru, and calmly reached into the glove box. What he pulled out was a navy blue folder legal stock paper, the good stuff. It had faded highlighter streaks across the cover like old battle scars, and stamped in gold foil were the words, Silver Tree Voting Trust, Class F Holdings Dash. Now, I didn't see any of this myself. I only heard about it later after everything blew up. But I can picture it, his hand resting on that folder like it was a weapon he'd buried years ago. And now? It was time to dig it up. He didn't call HR. He didn't call his wife. Not even the buddy who once told him to stop caring about a company that hadn't listed his name on their about page in years. He called one person, Evan Rohr, one of the original co-founders. Now just a quiet lawyer running a one-man firm 2 towns over. The kind of office that still used fax machines and brewed coffee in a percolator. Evan was the type who read corporate bylaws like they were scripture. Ian said 6 words. Activate the conversion clause. I'm taking direct control. And Evan? He didn't even ask why. Just said, understood. They never updated the bylaws. And that's when it all started. See, nobody, not Ryan, not legal, not even the swarm of consultants working on the rebrand, had a clue what Ian still had. His equity wasn't gone. It was just quiet, hidden behind 3 shell companies, locked into a blind trust, protected by a legacy clause from 2001 that allowed Class F shares to be converted into direct voting power, at the discretion of the holder. But nobody had ever bothered to ask who the holder actually was, because nobody cared. Ian had made himself invisible. He let them ignore him. But he never forgot. He remembered the vacations he skipped just to buy another half a point in Series B. He remembered selling his second car back in '07 to cover payroll with a personal bridge loan and grab a fraction more ownership. He remembered when they brought in Ryan, the guy who just tanked a lifestyle app, and told Ian to mentor him in supply chain realities, only to erase Ian's name from the executive summary 6 months later. 83.2% versus Ryan's 2. That's what Ian controlled. Not in any HR file or investor deck. But in filings Evan had kept spotless, double notarized, and locked away in a drawer only he had the key to. Ian didn't punch the dashboard, didn't scream, didn't light up a cigarette like some character in a revenge flick. He just adjusted the air vents, turned off the dash display, and tapped his fingers once on that leather folder. They thought they walked him out. Truth was, they just watched him walk in. The next morning, the old brass bell above Evan Rohr's law office let out its tired little clang as Ian stepped inside. Same way he had 20 years ago, back when he had nothing but a 3-slide pitch deck and a handshake. The place still smelled like legal pads and dust. Thermostat stuck at 66 because Evan always said, "Cold minds think clearer." Evan looked up from his desk like he'd been expecting that moment for 2 decades. He slowly took off his glasses. No small talk. No nostalgia. They just spread out the founding charter and got to work, retracing the paper scars of a company they'd both bled into. Evan flipped pages while Ian sipped black coffee from a chipped mug still bearing the old Silver Tree logo. Back when the company had a pine tree and a soul. Here, Evan said, pointing to a section near the bottom margin. Board expansions post-2015. None ratified by shareholder vote. He kept going. Executive appointments tied to Series D liquidity guarantees. All conditional on proxy approval. Ian nodded. Which they never got. They didn't even ask, Evan said. They assumed the trust was dead. Like you. Together they circled names, highlighted titles, flagged inconsistencies. Ryan had stacked the board with yes men. Light on compliance, heavy on strategy speak. Investor-friendly buzzards who sat through quarterly calls like they were TED Talks and nodded at any sentence with words like synergy or agile scaling. And not one of them had been vetted through the legacy process. Why would they question it? No one thought Class F shares even mattered anymore. No one thought Ian mattered. So Ian pulled out his phone and typed up one simple email. No drama. No threats. Just one line. Per my shareholder authority, please schedule a governance review. He CC'd the executive assistant, the general counsel, and the entire board. No emojis, no legal jargon. Just calm, quiet wait. Then he opened the company calendar, still had access since no one had revoked it yet, and created a new event. Subject line. Reconstitution dash. No notes, no attachments. Just one word and a time. Wednesday 9 a.m. main boardroom. That's all it took. The first ripples were small. A few reply-alls from confused assistants. Then the general counsel chimed in with a curt, "Please clarify authority basis." Ian didn't reply. He didn't need to. The original bylaws were attached. The ones they themselves had signed in ink, back when the company operated out of rented folding chairs and had one copier that printed everything crooked. Meanwhile, Evan quietly started submitting shareholder affidavits through the state corporate registry. Legacy proxy revoked. Direct control assumed. Majority stakeholder rights executed. No press releases. No headlines. No drama. Just quiet, deliberate moves. Ian's hand sliding across the chessboard while the other side was too busy posting thought leadership on LinkedIn to even notice they were getting played. The new world wasn't built on noise. It was built in the margins. And those margins, those footnotes, had been written by Ian, preserved by Evan, and completely ignored by Ryan. Ian didn't want his old title back. That wasn't the goal. He was setting the table. And they were about to choke on everything they thought they owned. At that exact moment, Ryan Callahan was halfway through sipping a $19 artisanal cold brew when the email hit his inbox. Subject: Reconstitution dash. He snorted, forwarded it to legal with a comment. Old guys pulling a Jerry Maguire. Ignore. Then he tossed his phone onto the reclaimed wood desk he had insisted on installing for aesthetic flow, and went back to picking which startup podcast quote he'd use to kick off the next all hands. Legal didn't ignore it. Andrea Morales, sharp, unflinching general counsel, opened the attachment. She adjusted her glasses, read line 47 of the founding documents twice, then once more out loud. Clause 14b. Class F governance authority, she said, her voice suddenly tight. Per shareholder majority via proxy or direct conversion. Any Class F stakeholder holding over 60% may call an emergency governance review, execute a board audit, and reassign executive appointments pending board ratification. Ryan leaned back, brushing it off. That's boilerplate from 20 years ago. We've got Series D bylaws now. Andrea didn't flinch. Series D didn't override Class F. They stacked on top. And unless someone formally amended the founding charter, with shareholder vote and state filing, Clause 14 still stands. Ryan blinked. Wait. Are you saying? Andrea cut him off. I'm saying he might actually be able to call that meeting. Legally. Silence. Across town, Ian stood in front of Dock 4 at the old logistics hub. The air smelled like pallet dust, machine oil, and actual work. None of that lavender wellness floor nonsense from HQ. This place was real. Built for movement. For muscle. And to the people there, Ian wasn't former. He was foundation dash. Mr. M. A forklift operator called out from the bay. His name tag read Reggie Dash, and he looked just like he did back when Ian still ran things on the ground. Didn't think we'd see you again. I could say the same, Ian replied, shaking his hand firmly. He made his way through the facility, nodding to familiar faces, taking quiet inventory of who was still around. He passed Janet in receiving. She paused mid-scan and smiled. Still wearing the same jacket, huh, Mr. M? Still fits, Ian said, tapping the patch on the sleeve. Built this place wearing it. They headed to the old corner office, now just a break room. And that's where he found Nolan. Senior logistics manager. Solid. Dependable. A workhorse. Nolan was never the polished type, but he never dropped the ball either. Solid. Reliable. The kind of guy you leaned on when everything else was falling apart. Ian poured them both coffee from a dented old pot that hadn't been replaced in over a decade. The stuff tasted like metal and memories, but neither of them minded. If I needed your vote on something, Ian asked, his voice low and steady, would I have it? Nolan didn't even blink. You never asked for credit, just results. You always said the warehouse doesn't care who gets the credit, only who shows up. Ian gave a quiet nod. I might need you to show up again. Just one more time. Outside, two dock workers leaned on the railing watching him walk out. He's really gone? One asked. The other shook his head. Doesn't look like a man who's gone. Looks like a man doing his rounds. They still called him Mr. M. No one made them. No memo was sent. No goodbye email from corporate. That's just who he was. Even now, back at HQ, Ryan was doing his best to shake off the tension. He scheduled another team-building offsite and floated the idea of themed Slack emojis to boost morale. But it wasn't working. The unease was spreading. Legal had gone quiet. The ops leads weren't answering as quickly. Someone from finance had just asked to re-review historical equity records. Something was shifting under the surface. No noise. No fanfare. Just quiet inevitability. The PDF was taking forever to load. Each percentage tick made Ryan's jaw tighter. He stood hunched over Andrea's desk, fueled by caffeine and anxiety, while Legal scrolled through the preliminary shareholder report. He figured it was just a standard compliance check. Something to delay Ian. Stall him. Make him feel heard. Then the cursor stopped. Andrea didn't say a word. She just turned the screen toward him and pointed to a line halfway down. He squinted at it. Didn't get it at first. Rich Pine Holdings LLC stake, 83.2%. Beneficial owner, Silver Tree Voting Trust. Formerly under proxy, converted to direct majority control status. Active. The silence landed first. Then the heat hit him like a rush of blood moving in reverse. 83? He croaked, halfway between a disbelieving laugh and a full-body dry heave. What the hell is this? This can't be right. Andrea didn't even look up. It's been validated. Twice. The trust was structured through legacy Class F shares. He's been quietly acquiring stakes for over 15 years. Ryan's voice cracked. Why wasn't this flagged? Why didn't you tell me? Andrea calmly slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside, a dated onboarding memo. You were advised to request a full cap table review during transition, she said. You declined. Said you weren't interested in old paper ghosts. Ryan stared at the folder like it was written in a different language. I thought the trust was just ceremonial. You assumed, Andrea replied. No pity. Just clinical precision. You never asked who held the proxy. So we followed the existing structure. And that's when the pieces started clicking in Ryan's mind. But not fast enough. It felt like trying to catch a knife as it fell. Ian's name had never shown up in the Series D paperwork. Never appeared in the voting groups. Because he didn't want it to. He was waiting. Watching. Preparing. And now, after they pushed him out? He didn't call a lawyer. Didn't ask for his seat back. He yanked the emergency brake on the entire machine. A new email dropped into Ryan's inbox. From Ian. Subject. Final board agenda. Ryan opened it like it might explode. There were 5 items listed. Clinical audit review. Bylaws revision. Governance reconstitution. Leadership restructuring. Board seat reassignments. Pending. Pending as in the changes were already made. They just hadn't been told yet. Ryan shoved back from the desk, stormed into the executive lounge, and slammed the door behind him. A few junior staffers flinched. The intern who managed the company podcast quietly removed Ryan's interview from the weekly episode. Everyone felt it. The shift. The scent of panic, cologne, and overpriced wool. Something had cracked. Ryan paced in circles, then barked into his phone, demanding an immediate call with the head of investor relations. But even as the line rang, he already knew. The investors didn't care who wore the suit. They cared who held the reins. Ian hadn't come back to reclaim a desk. He came back to bury the regime. Somewhere in the building, the executive printer kicked on, spitting out copies of the new board agenda. No announcement. No warning. Just quiet, methodical preparation for a meeting that wasn't a formality anymore. It was Judgment Day. By 8:58 a.m. the boardroom was full. Not a word was spoken. The silence wasn't respectful, it was suffocating. Executives clung to their coffee cups like the caffeine might somehow save them. Ryan sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched, fingers tapping the wood a little too fast. He ditched his usual light-toned, visionary suit for something darker. Less keynote-ready, more damage control. The investors patched in from New York weren't smiling. Andrea sat near the door, her laptop open, expression unreadable. Then the door opened. Ian walked in. Same fleece vest. Same steady gait. No assistant. No notes. No clipboard. He didn't sit. He didn't need to. He placed a folder at the far end of the table, his end now, and opened it without saying a word. The only sound was the HVAC system humming to life overhead. Let's begin, Ian said. No emphasis. No theatrics. Just a calm voice that had waited long enough. I'll keep this short, he added, sliding a single sheet across the polished wood. This is a list of all executive decisions made without shareholder majority oversight in the last 18 months. New hires. Expense authorizations. Vendor shifts. DEI rebranding consultants. Culture platform investments. He tapped the page. You'll find the original budget approvals here. And the actual expenditures here. He passed copies down the table, each executive eyeing the papers like they might bite. Then Ian folded his hands and looked up. I'd like to ask each of you something simple, he said. Did you personally vet this expense? He looked straight at CFO Kalin. Kalen froze. No, it was greenlit by strategy. Ian slid a page toward the sitter. And this hire? I was told it aligned with investor priorities, she stammered, eyes flicking nervously toward the screen. This strategy? Ian asked Ryan, who was visibly sweating now. It was an agile realignment, Ryan said quickly. Approved by the branding task force. Ian didn't flinch. The one with no board review, no reporting, and no audit trail? Ryan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Ian calmly straightened the papers in front of him. This company was built on care, on control, on accountability. That's why I didn't raise my voice earlier, because this isn't about noise. He paused, then turned toward Andrea. I invoke a vote of no confidence in the current executive structure. No yelling, no banging fists, just quiet motion, one hand raised, then another, then another. Even the two investors on screen gave subtle nods. Click, click, scroll, confirm. Motion carries, Andrea said evenly. Majority reached. Restructure authorized. Ian closed the folder with a soft thunk dash. Ryan leaned forward, scrambling for the kind of polished spin that used to win over rooms. You can't just replace an entire leadership team overnight. Ian finally looked directly at him. That's funny. You did. No one laughed. As the meeting wrapped up, a few execs leaned in close to Ian, notebooks in hand. Eyes wide, voices low. If there's a place for me in the new structure, I'd be honored. I've always respected your leadership. Just tell me how I can help. Ian nodded politely, said nothing. He didn't come back for flattery. He wasn't looking for apologies. He came to reset the table. And now that the hands had been raised, the house of cards was coming down. Quietly, precisely, and permanently. Ryan slumped back in his chair. Desperation creeping into every word. You don't understand modern governance, he said, his voice unraveling. Words spilling fast like a man trying to unbuckle his seatbelt mid-crash. This isn't how we handle restructures in today's climate. You're making a massive reputational mistake. Ian's voice cut through like a scalpel. I built the logistics backbone. He looked directly at Ryan. You built debt. Silence. Ryan blinked, like he couldn't believe he'd just been cut off. Like he still thought his voice carried weight. But it didn't. Not here. Not anymore. Not in a room where every vote was already tallied, every document already signed. Ian didn't make a scene. No big gestures. Just calmly reached into his folder and pulled out a single thick envelope. He handed it to Andrea, who stood up and moved with the quiet confidence of a closing attorney. 10 envelopes. Cream stock. Corporate watermark. Each one labeled in clean black ink with a name. Final notices. Termination letters. Effective immediately. Reviewed, notarized, enforceable. Including Ryan's. Some executives looked stunned. Others lowered their eyes. One let out a long breath through his nose, like he'd seen this moment coming but kept hoping it wouldn't. Authority for these actions has been verified, Andrea said flatly. Corporate compliance is in place. Severance will be administered under Clause 6.2 of your amended contracts. Ryan suddenly stood, half lunging across the table. You don't get to do this. This is my company. Ian didn't move. It was your performance deck dash, he said evenly. This is still my company. Before Ryan could snap back, the boardroom door opened. 2 members of security stepped in. Calm. Professional. No rush. Like they were showing up to fix a printer. They looked to Ian. He gave a small nod. Ryan's mouth opened but no words came. He looked around the room searching for someone, anyone, to back him. A glance. A nod. A lifeline. But no one looked at him. Not one. The same team that had applauded when he replaced Ian now stared down at the table like kids waiting to be sent to detention. I'll contest this, Ryan muttered as the guards walked toward him. You'll see. You should, Ian said. It'll give the new leadership time to clean up your mess. One of the guards opened the door. Ryan didn't move. For a second it looked like he might launch into one of his signature rants, talk of alignment, vision, disruption. But nothing came. He just walked out. The same way Ian once had. Only this time no one clapped. No one stopped him. No one said a word. Ian watched him go, then turned back to the room. Effective immediately, I'm naming interim leadership. He placed a slim binder on the table. Karen Delaney will serve as CEO during the transition. She knows the operations better than anyone here. I mentored her a decade ago. She kept this place running while the rest of you were off at offsites. There was a soft ripple around the table. Karen? Warehouse Karen. Ian didn't smile, but the look in his eyes said everything. It's time to rebuild. From the inside out. He didn't wait for applause. There wasn't any. Just silence, and a chair at the head of the table, spinning slowly as if the room still hadn't caught up. The office itself hadn't changed. Same glass walls. Same succulents. Same brand palette of ocean blues and mindful beiges. But something had shifted. Like the air pressure had dropped. You could feel it in the quiet halls, in the way people stopped talking in buzzwords, in the way Slack threads slowed down and emails started getting clear. Ian never moved back into his old office. Never took the big chair. Didn't want it. Instead, he worked out of a small room near the freight elevator. One of the old converted supply closets from way back. No nameplate. No title on the door. Just a laptop, a stack of operations briefs, and a steady flow of department leads coming in one by one, to sit across from him and explain what was broken, and what they needed to fix it. He didn't bark orders. Didn't hover. He asked the same 3 questions every time. What do you need to do it right? What did the last guy ignore? What don't I see yet? And that was it. The influencer budget? Quietly slashed by 70%. No memo. No press release. Just a calendar invite that vanished overnight. The role of Director of Brand Identity Experience was quietly retired. Gone without a press release, replaced by Trey, a former fulfillment supervisor. Trey didn't own a suit. Didn't need one. This was the guy who saved the company 6 figures last year by rerouting packaging vendors during a supply crunch. And now he had a seat at the table. Karen Delaney, interim no longer, ran a tight ship. Weekly ops reviews. Regular walkthroughs on the floor. And a recurring calendar slot labeled simply, Ask Me Anything, Warehouse Wednesdays 11 a.m. Whispers started. He never yells. He doesn't need to. You feel it, right? Like, it's working again. No viral campaigns. No brand relaunch. Just a quiet, steady return to competence. Vendor payments stabilized. Employee retention climbed. 3 major clients who had been half out the door renewed their contracts, without even being asked. One of them included a note with their renewal. Glad to see the grown-ups are back. The media caught on weeks later. A small tech blog ran a headline that said it all. Strategic correction by legacy investors brings Silvertree back to core. No clickbait. No drama. Just 4 paragraphs of clean, thoughtful reporting. The photo wasn't of Ian. It was of the original warehouse, half-built, covered in scaffolding and dust. That night Ian got an email. No subject. Just one line. Glad you kept the soul intact. Evan, the co-founder. The only one besides Ian who knew where the bones were buried. Who remembered how the walls were poured. Ian didn't reply. He just stared at the screen for a moment, then opened the company charter. He added a new clause to the governance guidelines. From now on, every sitting CEO would be required to meet in person with core operations staff once a month. No delegation. No substitutes. A chair would be reserved, no exceptions. He didn't announce it. Didn't make a speech. Didn't post about it on Slack. He just filed it. Quietly. One bolt at a time. The new boardroom was sleek. Muted brass, frosted glass. A conference table long enough to host a war council. But the energy in the room had changed. Calmer. More grounded. Karen stood at the head now. Not as interim anything. CEO. Her badge said it. Her voice said it. And the numbers backed her up. No theatrics. No buzzwords. Just quiet, clear reporting as she walked investors through the quarterlies. Margins up. Retention solid. 0 vendor disputes. Forecasts based in reality. Not espresso-fueled fantasy. Ian sat near the end of the table. Not leading. Not introduced. Just there. Karen glanced at him once toward the end. He gave her the smallest nod. When the meeting wrapped and the investors gave their polite approvals, Ian stood. Not to take the floor, just to say a few words. "This isn't about me," he said, scanning the room. "It never was. And it shouldn't be." His voice was soft, the kind that made you lean in without even noticing. "It's about not forgetting who keeps the lights on. Not the logos. Not the slogans. The people who actually know how to fix the circuit when it burns out." Then he walked to the far wall, took a small frame from his bag, hung it next to the IPO announcement and the glossy Series D press release. The photo was old, faded. 5 people in front of a half-built warehouse. Hoodies, steel-toed boots, no PR smiles, just pride. The original crew. Back when Silvertree meant something more than synergy slides and branded mugs. No one said a word. Ian looked around the room once more. Not proud. Not sad. Just finished. He turned toward the door, paused and said, almost to himself, "Dismiss the quiet ones all you want. Just don't forget to check the ownership." Then he walked out. No applause. He didn't need it. The door clicked softly behind him. Karen stood taller. The boardroom reset. The company would move forward. But now with memory. With roots. Out in the hallway, Ian kept walking. Past the founder wall. Past the etched glass slogan that once tried to package purpose into a tagline. Past the same reception desk where, just a year earlier, they tried to scrub him from the story. His steps were steady. No pause. No glance back. And the final thought, quiet as the air trailing behind him. They tried to erase a role. I erased the regime.